So thank you, Mr. Broaddus, Maurice, for your patience. I very much appreciate your patience and your willingness to be here as we navigate these technology challenges. And thank you all for being here. We are here today with Maurice Broaddus, our wonderful guest author, to discuss his fantastic novella, Buffalo Soldier. Welcome, Mr. Broaddus. Welcome, Maurice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm so pleased you could join us.
Mhm.
And thank you, Bill, who's got the book cover in his happy hands. Thank you, Bill. Such a beautiful cover. So gorgeous. And I feel like you were one of the last wonderful, fantastic steampunk pieces to come from Tor when they were still publishing steampunk. It's a stunning book.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for being here with us, for joining us. Um, and I'm just going to do that nonsense. There we go. So, Mr. I'm so sorry. I'm
You're
sort of
you're gonna keep
formal,
calling
and
me
I
Mr.
keep
Broaddus.
calling.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah,
I
no,
get it all day.
Maurice, Maurice. We're going to get there. Maurice, such a fantastic name. And now I'm thinking of the song. So, tell me a bit. You were drawing on some of your family heritage when you were writing this book. Could you tell me a little bit about the mythology and the culture that inspired those aspects of the story?
Yeah, yeah. So the journey actually started back in 2009 when I wrote a short story called Pimp My Airship. So it actually started with the short story. And
Fantastic.
so what happened was is this story is just so weird because I was on Twitter. I To be honest, I didn't know anything about steampunk. I knew enough about steampunk to make the following joke on Twitter. I said, I'm going to write a steampunk story with an all black cast, and I'm going to call it Pimp My Airship. That was it. That was the whole tweet. That was the joke. I was done with the steampunk genre at that point. But like six editors wrote me and said, when you're done with that story, send it to us. And I'm just like, oh, well, now I got to write a steampunk story. And so, and like I said, I didn't know much about steampunk. I started binging a bunch of steampunk at this point. So I started reading just a whole bunch of steampunk anthologies and just to get a feel for the genre and everything. And I'm just like, I can't really do this, not this way. And so so I what how did I end up doing that? I remember I basically was like, I'm going to I shouldn't I feel bad because it's like so much of my stories involve like alcohol use. But I ended up with opening up a bottle of vodka and then putting on a Parliament Funkadelic and then just going, all right, whatever comes up, this is going to be the backdrop of my story. And so a lot of the mythology for Pimp My Airship literally comes out of Parliament Funkadelic music, which is why there's a mothership and a bop gun and things like that are all just me just pulling from Parliament Funkadelic. And so that's how I wrote the original Pimp My Airship short story, right? So I did all the world building. And so the world building basically starts with America loses the Revolutionary War and remains a colony of Albion. And so now what does modern America look like because of that? And that's the backdrop for Pimp My Airship. In the short story, I make just passing references to the five civilized tribes or five civilized nations. I can't remember which one I called it in the story. And then I also talked about Albion still being at war with Jamaica because Jamaica is the other world power at the time. And that literally those are two throwaway lines in like one of the opening paragraphs in the short story. And so for background, so I was born in London, and my mother was born in Jamaica, and so that's why these elements start coming together in the story. And so I do all this, and but like all the world building's done, and so when Pit My Airship comes out, it's pretty well received and everything. And so I'm like, well, if the world building's done, when people ask me for more like steampunk stories, I'm like, well, this world's already built, so I'll just keep writing stories in this world. And so I started doing that, and then and I think I wrote 14 stories set in this world. Yeah, we have at least 14 stories set in this world. And one of the stories is called Step and Razor, and it's a novelette, and it was published in Asimov's magazine. And in Step
Oh,
and Yeah, and so technically, Step and Razor is the prequel to Buffalo Soldier because in Step and Razor, I'm like, well, I mentioned Jamaica as a superpower. Let me explore that world. And so I just do this whole steampunk story set in Jamaica. It's a world power and all this kind of thing. So and that's where I have the whole mythology about these espionage agents and everything going on in this world. And at the end of Step and Razor, our two main characters, Desmond and Liz, uh, leave Jamaica and make their way to America, and that's where Step and Razor ends. And so then when Lee Harris over at Tor, he reached out to me like, "Hey, can you write me a novella?" I was just like, "Well, let me pick up that story and see what Desmond and Liz are up to now, and basically just to give me an excuse to continue to explore in this world because we'd never taken a peek inside the five civilized tribes. We'd never seen Tejas as its own nation or anything. Like these were all just like literally throwaway lines to build out the world and Pimp My Airship. But I was just like, well, since it's here, let's continue to explore the world. And so that's how we got to Buffalo Soldier.
Oh my goodness. I love this story, the way it started with a tweet back in the day, and it's developed into this entire steampunk world that you
Mm-hmm.
created. I
Yeah.
also really appreciate that at the time you looked at what was going on in steampunk and you said, that is not the sort of story I want to tell. That's not where I'm coming from. This is not something I want to write. I have my own vision for things because you are actually a very accomplished author. You've written a lot of speculative fiction of other varieties. And so you came into this with a wonderful CV behind your belt, with already a lot of experience. And when we read Pimp My Airship, I was struck by what I thought were references to the Harlem Renaissance and, a lot of the musical culture. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
really delighted to learn that you were listening to Funkadelic when you sort of birthed the initial
Right.
brainchild of this world. It's a fabulous, fascinating version of the past,
Yeah.
a past that never was. It was a pleasure to read.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
but you mentioned that you were born in London, that your mama is from Jamaica originally. I'm wondering if she was part of the Windrush generation and if her experiences as part of the diaspora and your experiences, crossing that divide between the UK and America had an impact on your writing and what that was.
Yeah. So my mom has until recently has not read a lot of my stuff.
Mm.
Uh and so but when I was like I said when I was writing Step and Razor, I'm just like, no, this is literally a love letter to my mom. So we're gonna make Jamaica its own superpower. 'Cause I'm like, if England can rule the planet and it's just an island, why can't Jamaica? And so I was like, all right, so let's do this. And so I created a whole myth. And but actually, now I think about it, it actually even that started with a conversation I had with my mom. Because she so my mom actually lives. I'm at my home. I'm in my home office right now, and this was a up until last November. This was like a three-generation household because my mom lived with us, and my two sons lived with us, and so it was a very hectic. We'll just call it a hectic sitcom. Actually, it's the Broaddus family sitcom. It's what it was. My mom is essentially my wacky neighbor, and so she has her own apartment. As we turned the basement into its own apartment and everything, so she's our wacky neighbor who pops up unexpectedly. There's a whole thing, and so. But one time she had just gotten back from Jamaica, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we went to this part of Jamaica that is only open one time a year, because that's when the Maroons allow other people in, and so we got to see it." And I'm just like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Oh no, Jamaica has two governments. Not too many people know that because what happened was is the Maroon were never able to the British were never able to conquer the Maroon territories, and so basically they just ceded the Maroon territories of Jamaica to them, and they just took the rest of the island. And so the Maroon have their own system set up and everything, and so then once a year they allow people in to to their part of the island. And I'm just like, I never knew any of this. And so then I started thinking about, well, what if the Maroon repelled all of England and Jamaica remained its own under its own independent ways, and that's how they became their own superpower. They got to control all their resources and everything. They eventually become a superpower, and like that literally sprang off of a conversation I had with my mom at one point. So I ended up creating this huge mythology, and like I said, just basically as a love letter to my mom, which she never actually got around to reading, but I'm like, I at least printed out the story, presented it to her, it's like, look, I was at least thinking of you at one point in my career, so here you go. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I did not know that about the Maroons either, and I'm so fascinated. And I love that that was part of the genesis of the story and the birth of Desmond and Liege. Uh oh no, is it Liege? I think I
All right,
well,
so all right, so just so you know, with any of my stories, I just look. My job's just to write them. How you pronounce them is not my problem.
all right,
I
that's
usually
my
I usually
problem.
go I go listen to the audiobooks to figure out how they pronounce it. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great. All right, we'll go with that.
All right, excellent. That's very fair. That's very fair. I
It,
love
it,
that.
in my head, I've been going Liz because it's Liz Safari in my head, but
All right.
yeah,
Fantastic. Well, for today, we're all going to go with you because,
okay.
you know, you also were inspired by Funkadelic, and as far as I'm concerned, that makes you an absolute expert in all the
Okay,
things.
an absolute expert, absolutely.
An absolute expert. Certainly, you are the absolute expert in your writing and your story experience.
Mhm.
So, I'm a denizen of Steampunk Landia. Um, Many of us here are huge steampunk fans, and you shared at the beginning that you read through a bunch of steampunk and you thought, this is not really the stories I want to tell. This isn't really for me. Was there any steampunk you read that resonated with you? Has there been some steampunk that you've read since that you've really enjoyed? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I read what was it? I read there's an anthology called Extraordinary Engines that I read. And then the Vandermeer's steampunk collection
Oh, yes.
trilogy. I read a that trilogy of short story collection. I love short stories, so I'm always going to start with short stories.
Mm.
And then I read let's see then Paulo oh
Well,
what,
yeah. Oh my gosh, I know who you're talking about. The
that
wind-up girl, right?
I read Wind Up Girl. That's the easy way for me to do it. I read Wind Up Girl, and then I read Sherry Priest. Oh, what was the
Oh,
first one?
Bone Shaker.
Bone Shaker. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so and and it's so the only the part that didn't resonate with me was the whole. I felt like there was a cultural exclusion, and so it's like, oh, I feel like me and my culture have been systematically erased from this world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the part that I sort of rebelled against. And thus I went to, all right, so that's why we start with Parliament Funkadelic, because there's no erasure there. And you will know the spot where I'm starting from if I start with Parliament Funkadelic. There would be no confusion about
Mm-hmm.
where I'm coming
Mm-hmm.
from in my writing. But I see, and I dig so much of steampunk as a thing. Like Cherie Priest's book and Paulo's book. Yeah, I think my main thing is like they're steampunk is rife with being able to critique society in all sorts of interesting ways. And I think when the writers pull away from that critique, that's when it sort of loses me. But when they're able to do the critique and still have a great story, then it's like,
Yes.
oh yeah, I'm along for the ride. I'm along for the ride. Oh, daggone, there was another dude whose book I read I like a lot too, and I can't remember. I remember it's like they were chimney sweeps, and I'm just like, wait, what? Um,
Oh,
Daggone, I
now
can't.
I'm curious.
Yeah,
If it comes to you, please share.
I will.
But
I will.
you know, no pressure at the moment.
Yeah,
Because I know sometimes when something's just on the tip of my tongue, I have
right,
to move on and relax so it will float to the front of my brain.
right, right.
But no, Sherry Priest's book, Bone Shaker, I feel like there's not a similarity because you have your own voice and you have your own very beautiful style of writing. But I see a sort of, I say, vibe
Yeah.
similarity between Pimp My Airship and Bone Shaker because it's kind of gritty
Mhm.
what you're writing in Pimp My Airship, and you have some of that grit also in Buffalo Soldier, but it's never sort of gratuitous, and you are not just being edgy for edginess sake, right?
Right.
The grittiness is born out of the understanding of the social context. It's made for a very interesting read.
Well, I
And
mean, no, I'm just going to add to one of the things I when it came to writing steampunk, I like if you're going to have punk in the name of the genre, we need to have some punk aspects to it. So
mm,
what does the societal rebellion aspects look like? And so
mm.
that's the other piece. I was just like, yeah, it's more than just an aesthetic. There is a philosophy, I think, that's underneath all of it, and I want to be true to that too.
Oh, yes. And I think you have captured that punk element, sir. And I've read both of these books a couple of times now, and I have to admit that I found, especially Pip My Airship, because there's so much there. The second read really illuminated a great deal for me, and I picked up so much more. They warrant multiple reads because you have created fascinating worlds with a lot of depth. But my final question for you before we go in, because I realized I could monopolize the time, and that's not fair. So my final question for you is, could you share if you have inspiration outside of steampunk, who some of your authors or music or poets are that have
Oh,
propelled you? You don't have to give an exhaustive list. I realize I'm
right,
asking
right.
a terrible question, but maybe a handful of your favorites.
Um, let's see. Some of my favorite authors. Well, N.K. Jemisin is always at the top. N.K. Jemisin, Toni Morrison,
Mm.
Octavia Butler. They inform a lot of my writing. Honestly, like Walter Mosley and George Pelecanos and Elmore Leonard. I'm a huge crime fiction junkie, and so I love crime fiction. Um, yeah, so anytime, yeah, I'm never too far from finding an excuse to stick an interrogation scene into a book because of my love of crime fiction.
Oh, that's
Uh,
fantastic.
so you'll definitely see that every so often.
Yeah.
Um, who else? Poets. I actually, I was actually late to the poetry scene. It wasn't until I started my friendship with Linda Addison that I even began to develop an appreciation for poetry. And then I just sort of dove into it at that point. Um, it's funny because I literally just earlier today I just came from a local event where it featured some of our local poets here in Indianapolis, and I'm just like,
Mm.
yeah, this is just the scene I vibe with now. So, um, poets. Let's see. Well, obviously I'm a fan of Langston Hughes since I've named my most recent trilogy after a lot of after his poems.
Yeah.
Um, Nikki Giovanni,
Mm.
uh, Mari Evans. Yeah, so there's
Ah.
a lot of these folks are just to inform my work and my worldview in a
Mm.
lot of ways.
Well, I don't know if I was projecting at the time we were reading Pip My Airship, but I really picked up a lot of Langston Hughes kind of. I
Yeah.
felt like there was some homage there, and I loved
Steeplejack.
that.
Sorry.
Oh, Steampunk!
Steeplejack. All right, there we go. I feel much better now. Steeplejack.
Fantastic. So Steeplejack was the book about the chimney sweeps, everyone. I
Right,
knew if we moved on, it would float to the top.
right.
Thank you, Maurice. That is
That was
lovely.
gonna
And
bug me. That was literally gonna bug me to like the rest of the interview. I'm like, I know this book.
we read it years ago. It was a fantastic book. We might have to revisit it sometime in the
Yeah.
future. It's been an age, but that is
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so we, oh, pardon me.
oh no, I was going back to one of your comments when you when you talking about the world of Pit My Airship. So the other thing I was going to add was that so when the original Pit My Airship short story came out, the big criticism of the story was that readers were like, "Oh, we just felt like there was this whole world here that we didn't get to see."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I was only being paid for 5,000 words. I mean, I don't know what to tell you after that, but like, I'm only getting paid for 5,000 words. You're not going to see the whole world." Uh, but I did do that level of world building because I do have a bad habit of doing the same amount of world building I would do for a novel that I would for a short story. I just really love that. I see you. I see you, Karen. Guilty as charged. Um, but yeah, because I just love world building, and so when I did the Pit My Airship short story, and then that's why I came back and did those other, like I said, about probably at least 14 stories in the same world, because I was just like, oh, the world's built. Let me keep going back to this world. It gives me an excuse to flesh out more and more of this world that I do love. I love this world, so can come back to it pretty easily. And then I came back around and said, well, let me see. I'd never adapted one of my short stories into a novel before. So then let me turn Pit My Airship, the short story, into Pit My Airship, the novel. And that's why I came up. And again, just as an excuse to let me play with this world one more time and do a definitive capstone on the world.
I love that. Do you think, I see Bill is asking the next question. Any chance those short stories are going to become an anthology? Because I think we'd all love to read them.
I I would say there was a pretty good chance, because the fact that I know exactly how many stories were in
Hmm.
this world
Hmm.
tells me that at some point I will have all of them done. I think there's one more story I think I'd like to write, possibly in this world. Um, I think in the world, the last story I published in it was for a magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and it's the story of how Liz gets put. It's the story of Liz in jail. So it's when he gets captured and put into jail for the first time.
Oh.
So that was the last story I wrote. Um, and that basically takes us almost all the way up to Pit My Airship, the novel at that point in terms of Liz's story.
Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. Well, I hope that this comes to fruition. And when it does, I'm going to be optimistic. Please let us know so we can help promote your book and
Okay.
read it. That would be wonderful to have that anthology.
Oh, great.
So, thank you very much, everyone.
You're welcome.
I am going to take us in to the bigger conversation with everybody. And so, Karen, you're up first.
Oh dear.
My question for everyone, of course, is always, please share something you really loved in the book, and then please share your question for Maurice. All right, Karen, you're up.
First of all, I apologize if you hear noises. We're getting a slab poured out the back. So, um, right. I didn't actually get the book, but I've found a few little excerpts online, and so I really have to get the book. But I do have a question. So, I noticed that you've done work with Marvel superheroes, Firefly, Dungeons and Dragons, steampunk, urban fantasy. There's a whole long list. Is there a genre that you haven't written yet and that you'd like to write? And coming off that world building thing, do you get to expand the worlds when you do your Firefly D&D stuff, or do you have to stick within theirs?
Oh,
I'm a D&D person, so.
I understand. And hey, so let's see. The first question. What was the first question? The
What genre have you not
Oh,
written yet that
genre.
you'd like to play in?
Okay. So I'll start there. And so I am like the nightmare for my agent. I'm not gonna lie. My agent, every time she is like, because she just wrote me a couple of days ago and was like, hey, because we're in the middle of negotiating a new book deal for there. I'm in the middle of negotiating a new book deal. So there you heard that part here. Um and I don't know if I've ever written in the same genre twice. And so that's part of that is problem A. Problem B is I work on multiple things at a time. And so she literally began her email to me is like, look, we have an editor. They're interested in this book, but I'm not even going to return their I'm not even going to return an email to them unless you can convince me that you have a plan for how are you going to do 4 books in 1 year. And I'm just like, I have a cunning plan. Trust me. I got this under control. I got you. I got you. Um, and so we I lay out this plan, like here's how I'm gonna break up my year so I can get all these books all done on time. Da 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 da. That said, so I have this idea for a cozy mystery that I've never written a cozy before, and I'd really love to write a cozy mystery. And here's the pitch, and I gave her the pitch, and then she's just like, Maurice, you you have no room in your schedule to write a cozy mystery.
I'm writing a cozy mystery now.
And then she goes, but if you were to write it, it would take me about 2 weeks for me to sell this pitch. So I'm not saying write this book. I'm just saying when you find some free time, yeah, write me that cozy mystery. So
I hope you do write that cozy mystery. That sounds delightful.
yeah.
Karen, did you have a follow-up question, or did you
Yeah,
answer questions?
the Firefly question.
Yeah, and
yeah, the
D&D.
Firefly question. Yeah, and so yeah, any of that work, like, see, so that was near the beginning of my career when I was, trying to figure out different ways to how am I going to do different writing in order to sustain myself as a career and everything. And then and so I had this opportunity to write for different role playing games. So I think I came in writing Leverage, then did Marvel Superheroes, and then did Firefly. And I was real nervous about Firefly, and because there was a lot of back and forth. And then they go, well, the reason why there's so much back and forth is because, and plus I was struggling with the whole idea of like, I'm going to be I'm going to be generating a lot of ideas for this IP that I do not control, and once I give these ideas that, they're no longer mine, so I was kind of wrestling with that. And then they came back with, yeah, but here's the problem is anything you do in the Firefly role-playing game automatically becomes canon for all of Firefly. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. Allow me to do a thing then. And so then I dove into the Firefly role-playing game stuff, and I just created all sorts of stuff for the Firefly role-playing game because I'm like, oh, it's gonna automatically be canon. Oh yeah, we're good. I will jump in here, have all these ideas. Let's blow this world out. So yeah, it was a good time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And now I want to check out the Firefly role-playing game like never before. Fantastic. All right. Terry, my friend. Yes, hello.
Hello. Hello, Maurice.
Hello.
I had a great uncle, only he pronounced his name Morris. I don't know why he did that.
So anytime I hear my name called Morris, like only 2 people ever call me Morris. One was the secretary of my elementary school. She would always call me Morris. So anytime, I was called to the principal's office, which was actually more times than I care to remember. It would always be Morris over the intercoms. And then the other person was my grandmother. My grandmother always called me Morris. So those are the only 2 people who ever called me Morris. But go ahead.
Isn't that funny? It must be a generational thing then, because that probably was about the age of my great uncle. I enjoyed the book. I want to know more about Lige, the history of his name, and he's going to be okay, right? I'm a big children's advocate.
Me too. Me too. So Lige, so it's Lige Tafari.
Yes.
Because the Jamaican religion of Rastafari, those are 2 related. They are very much related. So Lige means, I believe Lige means foot, and the Ras means head.
Okay.
And there's an important reason for that. And so the background to Lige, as it turns out, so this all comes out in the Step and Razor story, is
I'll have to find it.
Yeah, it's and if you can't find it, it will eventually be collected in apparently this collection I'll be doing of my steampunk work.
Oh, you better hurry.
And so I'm on it.
Okay. I'm not far from Indianapolis. I can come and help you.
Okay, I appreciate that. But Lige is so in Jamaica in Step and Razor, the government was trying to create this program to basically control the people. How can we control the hearts of the people? And so they, as one does, they decide to clone Haile Selassie, who was the Messiah figure for the Rastafari religion.
Yep.
The clone of Haile Selassie is Liz.
Ah.
So Liz is a clone of Haile Selassie, and so
Okay.
and so he was being raised to be this puppet for the government. That was
Right.
literally his purpose of being born. Desmond encounters him and goes, "We want this child deserves to have a life of his own, deserves to have his own agency." And so Desmond decides he's going to rescue Liz and escape the island and just get out. He essentially betrays his own mission to rescue this young boy and take him to this new land to become a father figure for this young boy. And so as Liz grows up, because these are the stories I end up writing, Liz actually becomes, in his own right, a community activist, a voice for people, as his own choice, not because of being a puppet for the government. And that's what lands him in prison, is he gets captured by the government and lands in prison. And so my story of him in prison is called Babylon Systems. So every story involving Liz, by the way, is all I end up naming them all after like Bob Marley songs. So it's like so you can always follow Liz's journey by the Bob Marley tunes that form his soundtrack.
Okay.
So it's Babylon Systems, but even in prison, he does what he does, and so he ends up organizing those people who are incarcerated, and he basically tells the system, "No, you don't have me imprisoned. You have me dealing with you from the inside. I'm in the belly of the beast. I'm dealing with you from the inside now," and that's Liz's whole purpose. So he's a community activist. He's a freedom fighter, no matter where he is. He's going to be a voice for freedom wherever he lands.
I love this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Terry. Great question, by the way. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of hunger to read these short stories.
Right,
So,
right.
all right, Kelsey, hello, my friend. You're up next.
Hello. I adored Buffalo Soldier so much, and I'm so happy to hear that there's more of this world in the Pimp My Airship. I'm going to definitely have to check that out. Since we talked about Liz, am I saying it right? Liz?
Liz, yeah.
Oh, perfect. So much because I had the exact same questions about Terry. I love his character so much, and I was very concerned about where his story was going. I wanted to ask about is it pronounced Kate? The
Oh,
the Pinkerton.
yes.
I love what you did with her because up until a certain point, I wasn't sure if Desmond was hallucinating her in his head or if she really was doing something.
Yeah.
I love the idea of her powers kind of being like almost a dark mirror image of Liz's where somebody else
Liz,
has
yep.
gone into it.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering about your thought process with her arc because I thought it was brilliant.
So she was, I'm trying to remember how I started creating Kate. There was a female Pinkerton agent historically. And so Kate is loosely based on her. And plus as I was developing her, just Kate was just this badass character in my head. I'm just like, I want to just do more with Kate. And so Buffalo Soldier actually wasn't intended to be a novella. So I should start there. Again, I was asked to write a short story originally, and I wrote this short story. And so Buffalo Soldier was this 5,000 word short story, and the editor rejected it because they were just like, the story feels broken, but not in a bad way. It just feels like it just should be more. And so I was like, well, that's because again, I'm trapped by this 5,000 words. And so then when I did my revision of the story, it came out to 12,000 words. And then the editor was like, "Oh, this story is great. I'm going to reject it again because it's now too long for my magazine." Um, but I really enjoy this version of the story. And so basically, every time I do a draft of it, it basically allows me to increase Kate's role in this story, right? And so then when Lee came to me and said, "Hey, can you write a novella?" I'm like, "Well, I'm already halfway to a novella now. let me just go ahead and expand it out." And so it allowed me to again tell more about Kate, tell more about her background and everything, and plus I just love westerns is what it boiled down to. And I really wanted to do this western type of story in steampunk, a western steampunk story, and that was going to be my big entry into for Buffalo Soldier. And I was just like, and Kate, so it's part Pinkerton and but part is she's also the Clint Eastwood character from all the spaghetti westerns. In my mind, that is Kate. That is Kate right there. And so I mean, and I hate it when I attach myself so much to a character because I knew full well nothing bad's going to happen to Kate. I don't care if she's the antagonist. Nothing bad's going to happen to Kate because she's just too badass. And I may want to use her down the road and just do a whole Kate thing at some point. So, no, I greatly, in fact, when I got the cover for Buffalo Soldier, I fell in love immediately with the cover. And the only thing about the cover is like the artist had Kate's hair different than how I described it in the book. And I pointed that out and they were just like, "Oh, we can change that." I'm like, "No, no, no. Do not change anything about the cover. I'll just change Kate's hair in the story."
I love that.
So that's what we end up doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Kelsey. Great question. Lady June Squill, hello, my darling. Good evening.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. I had gotten new speakers, but of course they ran out of power, so I had to go and scramble and find my old speakers because the speaker on my laptop is crap. You want to know my favorite scenes? I loved the whole Seminole scene. And my favorite character is Kajika, the woman. And because I've seen or I've never actually done, I don't think, but Seminole patchwork and for like quilts and for the decorations on clothing. So that was my favorite thing. And so I thought she was a wonderful character, a very strong woman, and stood up to her husband, the one with the arm.
Right.
That was really cool. And I thought that we'd encountered some of these characters was that probably in Pimp My Airship that we encountered? Because I don't think we've read other short stories.
Yeah.
Is that
We have not read other short stories, although now clearly we need to find them all or wait for that anthology.
Right.
Yeah. But it's the Desmond. I didn't remember having read this before, although it was on my in my book, my Kindle. But the names of the characters, especially Desmond, I thought, God, he's been in something else. So, but he wasn't. Huh?
No. Desmond does make an appearance in Pimp My Airship, the novel.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Lady June Squill. I think we're going to probably have to revisit Pimp My Airship in a couple of years. We try not to, read them too close together again, but we've read it twice, so maybe it's time for a third time.
That Steeplejack, we didn't read it. We haven't read that in this book group.
Oh, we haven't. Well,
I have been in this book group since the very beginning.
Since the very first book.
I want an award for that.
That's correct. That's correct. So, we are going to have to read Steeplejack.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, my darling. All right, Laura, hello.
Hello. I agree with June that I really like Kajika too. I thought she was a very strong character, being in charge and not letting being a woman or being pregnant or anything else stop her from doing what she needed to do. So she was one of my favorite characters. And I like Lidge too. He was very cool. And one of my questions was, is there a sequel? But apparently, yes, there is a sequel that I just need to go find. So,
well, there's not a direct sequel to A Buffalo Soldier. So in my head canon, if I was to revisit this universe, I wanted to write a story that takes place between Buffalo Soldier and Babylon Systems. So Babylon Systems is when he ends up in jail. But I wanted to do one more story that comes directly after, probably a year or two after Buffalo Soldier. So there's a hole right there that I would love. I would love to come back and do a story in, partly to revisit like literally all the characters you've all talked about.
Yeah.
Like, let me just go ahead and revisit all of them one more time. And, but yeah, that is what I think that's probably the big holdup for me doing the collection, is because I know that story exists in the back of my head, and I'm like, I really need to write that story at some point. So
Well, thank you. I really loved the book.
thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right. Alicia, my darling, it's your turn.
Hello. My brain's gone. What were we talking? Yeah, I have no brain today.
All
I
right.
have a
Well, I
voice.
see you.
All right.
I see you making a corset, so I get it. My
No, it's
question for
fine.
you. Oh, my question is, what was something you enjoyed about the book?
Oh,
And then, if you have a question for our author guest.
because this is the second time I read the book, I kind of skimmed through the beginning because I really liked. I was very intrigued by the culture of the Native American tribes, and that whole technology and their whole approach to it is completely different, and I just adored it, and I just wanted to spend like a book there. I really liked that aspect of the book. And I really liked the storytelling aspect. Like everybody is live these stories. My question is, the inspiration for the stories that were told to live, are they things like the one I know is traditional, the Jamaican one, I think, that because I've kind of heard a variation of it before, but I don't know where the inspiration for the others are or came from.
Yeah. So the River Mama story is the Jamaican story is again is me doing a nod to my mom and some of the stories that she would tell as bedtime stories, which I look back and go, why would you do this to children, telling some of these stories? There's that. And then for the Native American story, I had actually been this was like a year or two before I wrote Buffalo Soldier. I'd been commissioned here in town to write. They were doing a series of plays about the history of Indiana, and they had commissioned me to write two different plays about the history of Indiana. And I'd written one about the Native Americans that used to, I mean, it's Indiana, therefore, there's a rich Native American history here. And so I'd written a story, a play set there, and then I'd also written another one, and they ended up going with the other story, the other play that I wrote. And I'm just like, but as an author, there are no wasted words. And so because I have this story already here, it's like, I'm going to use this story somewhere. And then I actually stumbled upon that theme of storytelling and story as home as I was writing Buffalo Soldier. And so then it made perfect sense for me to include the story that I'd written for this story, because I was just like, oh, this is thematically, this works perfectly. So, but it's like one of those things I kind of wrote my way into before I realized, oh, this is literally the theme of the book. So that's how that came about.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Thank you, Alicia. Great question. Okay. Right. So, hello, Nan. Hello, Nan. It's your turn. Please join us. Also, thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm excited to be here tonight. Totally. Maurice, I loved this novella. I loved it.
Thank you.
First of all, the way you drop us into the world reminds me of Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, where in the first, say, 10, 15 pages, you're experiencing the world in situ. There's no, well, as you know, Bob.
Right.
It's brilliant. I mean, you're picking up the patois and learning words that you've never heard in that context. It was just genius. And I really, really, as an avid world builder, it's like my favorite thing to do. It was just brilliantly done. And I loved the way you dropped those stories in because they're so thematically on point, and yet they're helping us learn more about I'm really impressed with the story. I loved it. My question, as an avid world builder and a person who loves alternate history, is how did you decide what the different players on the chessboard were going to end up like based on your supposition, because it's a supposition in my novel as well, that America never became America.
Right.
How did you wield all of that history into what came out of it?
You know, the crazy part is history was always my worst subject in school. And it's literally not until I became a writer that I've really started to love history, which now I'm going back now as a teacher going, you know, we teach history wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because if you would have told me in elementary school and middle school and high school that history is just a collection of stories, I'd have been all in. Because I'm like, I can't get enough of good stories. And so that was part of it. And then it's just the whole idea of like learning history that way and then telling history. And then the idea that history is like this curated thing anyway, because we learn history based on who's curating it for us, as opposed to us being able to just explore, you know, go out and just explore stories. And so these are all the things that are sort of playing around in the back of my head. Like what happens if someone else is curating the stories? Then what does it look like? Even with the same events, what does it look like? So yeah, so those are all the sort of things that were just bouncing around in my head.
Oh, that's super.
Yeah. I'm also going back to your comment about the world building, because I do spend like when I was world building for the actual, well, for all of this stuff, how much my world building, I mean, I just spend so much time world building, and then by the time I'm done, I'm like, there is no way, you know, I've spent a lot of time and I've thought through a lot of this world, and I can't just dump it on people. And so the in situ thing is literally I have so much world here, I just got to drop you in it and you figure it out. Which, and then I realized, wait, that's what I love to do as a reader. Like, just drop me in the world. I'll figure it out as I go. Let me just run around. I'll pick it up. And so that's always my favorite reading experience also. So I'm just like, yeah, this is great. We'll just do it this way.
Brilliant.
Oh,
absolutely great.
Delightful. And Nan, thank you. It's wonderful to have you here. And thank you for your excellent question.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, Nancy, it's your turn. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I loved the book. It was interesting because I'm midway through the Stephen King Dark Tower series that has the Western and the future, and I was getting confused as to whether this was another part of that at some points, and and probably the biggest compliment is I wanted more at the end because you built such a fascinating world with, like you said, with what a different America, and with Jamaica involved, and great characters that you just cared about. The question I had was along the lines of where Terry mentioned about Kate, is that I found her so interesting, and Desmond's such a good guy, and Liege, and I feel like Kate wants to be, but and do you think Desmond will ever, and Liege will ever inspire her to drop her mercenary ways?
I think that is actually the story I want to explore. If I do the sequel to Buffalo Soldier, I think that is actually going to be the heart of the story. Is all those relationships impacting one another?
Okay. And I can't wait to check out Pip My Airship and other books you do. So thank you for your gifted writing. Yeah,
Thank you.
Great story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. As an aside, I used to tell people, I think you should listen to jazz and 1930s jazz while you're listening to Pimp My Airship, and maybe a little hip hop from the 80s. And now I think you should just listen to Funkadelic. No, it's a wonderful read. So, all right, we've got Brandon. Would you like to ask a question, Brandon? See. All right. Brandon, I'm going to give you a moment. If you don't want to speak or be on camera, you can always type your question in the comments and I'm happy to ask it for you. And also Sue is here. Sue, do you have a question you would like to ask?
I think Sue had a couple questions in the chat.
Oh my goodness. Let me see if I can scoot up on them. If anyone else gets there to them, please share because I have the jankiest setup here.
I saw that she had asked about whether or not hang on, where I just saw it. Oh, do I ever typed out or track my world building
Yes.
in my stories? Now, I think someone else had asked a question along those lines too. Oh yeah, how do I keep track of the world building?
Thank you. Thank you,
and
everyone.
and so yeah, I do I end up creating a world Bible basically for my works. In fact, it was literally with Pit My Airship. I was just like, I need to start tracking this in a more systematic way, and so that's when I developed the practice of just instead of just keeping it all in my head, it's like you do have all these stories. Let's start organizing them. So I created a world Bible for Pit My Airship, and then that's just been my process moving forward. Is like, let me create a Bible. Here's the history of the world. Here are the main characters. I'm thinking, let's see, because for the Astra Black trilogy, I mean that World Bible is just ridiculous because I have timelines and maps and basically all the character notes. Oh yeah, it's all it's all in there. And then as a reader, then I get to like put them in, because like I said, there's no wasted words. So like my whole timeline for like in the Astra Black trilogy, well, now the timeline is the beginning of the book, and then the glossary I use to keep track of my own words I kept using throughout the book. It was like, ooh, it's my first time I get to put a glossary in the back of a book, and I'm like, yeah, nerd level unlocked all of a sudden. There's that. But yeah, I keep a whole document. I keep a Word document, and that's how I track all of the world building. In fact, it was interesting because when I was writing Pit My Airship, the novel, I got stuck about somewhere between halfway and the 3/4 mark in the book. And I couldn't realize why. I didn't know why I'd hit this sort of like this writer's block, which kind of thing. And then I realized the one aspect of the world I hadn't built out was the economic system of the world. How do the economics actually work in that world? Because the next part of the story all turned on the business aspects of the world. So then I was like, oh, well, let me build out. Darn, I guess I have to do some more world building. I hate doing that. So I go back and do the world building. And all of a sudden, oh, shockingly, the rest of the novel then, comes pouring out. So.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great questions, Sue. And great questions, everyone else. It's been lovely. And Maurice, you are so fantastic. I love hearing you talk about your stories and your writing experience in general. And I just have to say, the world building really shines in your stories because there is so much depth. And they warrant rereading, and something that's shallow you can't keep rereading. And so I'm excited to read Pit My Airship again now that I know even more about your experience. As an aside, you mentioned early on that Octavia Butler is one of your authors who really inspired you. And I love her writing too, but I'm particularly keen on her short stories. They're such gems and they don't get enough love. And I just feel a little kinship there between your short story work and hers. And I love that you are passionate about short stories. Yeah. So whilst I could natter on quite a bit more, we have about 15 more minutes of question time, everyone. And so if anyone has another burning question they would like to ask Maurice while we have him here as our gracious, wonderful guest, please let me know. Also, hello to our wonderful kitty companions who are joining us, Boba. So if you have a question, please just unmute yourself and ask away.
I do have one more question.
Yes,
I'm
please.
sorry, Kelsey, go ahead.
You can go ahead. I'm still working on phrasing it.
Okay. You've stepped into the world of the 5 tribes, which I absolutely 5 nations, which I absolutely love, because I'm thinking of the Iroquois Confederacy, history buff. How did you're also telling Seminole tales, and the Seminoles were absolutely fascinating people, still are. How do you avoid misappropriation? I mean, it's something that I in the next thing that I'm writing, I have to be really careful. And I know enough because of the many idiot degrees that I own to take on Aztec or Maya. But as I step into North America, I don't even have a sensitivity reader yet. And I'm really concerned. So how did you handle that?
Yeah, by almost quitting the book.
Oh no.
That's pretty much where I landed. When I there were 2 parts that had me very nervous. And so one was when my editor was like, we need to hear from Liz more, because in the early drafts, Liz didn't speak at all.
Oh.
And so the editor was like, no, we need to have Liz's voice, and and so and I was a little nervous because Liz basically codes as autistic.
Yeah.
And I was like, how so me writing an autistic character, I was just like, okay, well, how I do that. And then as it turns out, I was just like, literally my nephew, who is downstairs at the moment and was part of the inspiration for Liz, because he's autistic. And I was just like, oh, wait, I'm just writing my nephew. Okay, this is great. I can do this, no problem. And then with the Native American storyline, I was just like, I'm not gonna lie, I really thought the internet was gonna land on my head at one point. I was just like, okay, I am treading into some fraught territory, if not done right. And so I was just like, well, hang on, let me just do my job as a writer. And so part of my thing is like, if I'm gonna write a character, a story, everything, I always start with, well, where am I in this story? What is my story I could tell? Because I say, if I was writing the story from Kajika's perspective, like if Kajika was my main character, then I'd be like, oh, okay, no, this is not my story I should be out here telling or even trying to tell. Right. But I'm still telling just Desmond's story. So I very much, that is my through line here. I'm concentrating on that. I'm still going to do my job in terms of writing, fully fleshed out characters, doing a fully fleshed out world, all that sort of thing. And then I handed my story to one of my Native American friends, and I was just like, look, I have this thing, and I'm not too sure how here you go. And she always charges me dinner, so if I when in doubt, she's like, all right, well, here's the menu I want. So, then she gives me the menu, and I'll fix her dinner and everything. And then she'll give me the critique on the story. But she just came back with like, oh no, Kajiki even makes the jokes I would have made, the native jokes I would make. So I'm like, okay, all right, good. I thank you. I a huge sigh of relief, because I was really nervous. I had a flat ass joke in there that I was really nervous about, but but she was like, no, this is perfect. It's almost like you were writing me in this story. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
So.
All right.
Thank you, Nan. Great question. Thank you very much. All right, Kelsey, are you ready with your question?
Yes, it still might be phrased awkwardly, but I think I've got it now. So with your approach to steampunk, I love how each of the different countries and cultures had their own like take on steampunk. And I was wondering if maybe you could speak to either the research or the thought process on that, because like there seemed to be such a huge difference between like the Albion tech and like the stuff with the colonies versus even what was going on in Jamaica, even though we didn't get to see that like head on.
Oh. Yes. Because this was very intentional. So like with the five nations, for example, I was like, all right, so yes, we have an alt history going on here, but what would the tech look like? And I landed on green tech, for example. And so everything was I don't think you'd call it green punk or anything, but I mean that's the through line of like how is nature involved in the technology? Nature as technology is basically what I was going for with that. What you didn't see in Jamaica is one of the reasons why Jamaica becomes a superpower is because they skip the steampunk tech and go straight to solar power. And so that's how Jamaica is able to sort of leapfrog technology and become a world power, is because they keep their own resources and then go straight to solar power for their society, leaving sort of the Albion world, still struggling with steam tech and steam, steam technology. And so it was very intentional in terms of how each culture would approach the technology that basically powers their world, and then what does that say about their world, and what does the societal impact have if this is the technology, this is the thing that powers us. How does our society reflect living through that?
I love that. I just thought it was so cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. Great question. Thank you, Maurice. Solar punk sort of vibe is just marvelous. Yeah.
Right.
And I love that. It's, if I may say, the English historically used their advanced technology to pick on people a lot. So I sort of love turning the tables on them in the story.
Right.
I think that's great. All right. Any other questions, my darlings? All right. Maurice, I feel like you must be just an incredible instructor, professor for your students, because you are such a delightful, marvelous speaker. Hearing you speak about your writing, your worlds, your process has been so enlightening and absolutely engrossing. I'm afraid I'm going to have to read everything you've written now. I'm so
Oh,
deeply
well,
fascinated.
I
So,
guess.
thank you very, very much for your time today and for speaking with us. I would love to have you back. If you produce your short story collection set in this world, we'd love to have you as a guest again. And
Absolutely. This was
if
so
we,
fun. These were
thank
such
you.
great questions.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. So we will be skipping March, everyone. In March, we have Wild Wild WestCon. And to be honest, I just don't have the stamina to do that and book club in March. So we will be back in April on the third Sunday of the month. Don't ask me what the date is right now, but it'll be the third Sunday of the month at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. And we're reading Karen Memory by Elizabeth Bear, which is a fantastic steampunk book. I am very excited to discuss the sewing machine with all of you. So watch out for that. And the rest of our book list is up and available for the rest of the year in our book club. A group, the Temporal Textual Talks. So if you have any questions about what's coming up, you can check it out there. We do have our Sip the Tea event coming this month, so I hope you will all join me for my artist interview on the 24th. I'm very excited to be joined by two artists of Native American ancestry who will be joining us to talk about their experience creating historical garments and teaching sewing and all of these things. So an interesting follow on to this wonderful book that we discussed today. Maurice, thank you for your time. This has been such a delight, and I really appreciate you making time for us. I know you have a very busy schedule, and your family is visiting you this weekend as well. I am here. I'm sorry. Oh, no, all right, good. I'm here in Atlanta this weekend at a little convention called Con Possible, not that far from Indianapolis as the crow flies, I suppose. And perhaps we can lure you down here sometime because it is fantastic. I've been here with such delightful authors as Milton J. Davis and others, and so yeah, it's really been a jolly, fantastic weekend. So, with that, my darlings and Mr. Broaddus, I'm going to tell you all what I say every time. Please treasure yourselves as I treasure you. Stay hydrated, drink the good tea, wash your hands, get your vaccines, get your vitamins, because you are irreplaceable. And Mr. Broaddus, we need you to stay healthy so you can keep writing, so we can keep reading your books. I look forward to someday reading your cozy mystery, which we're now all very hungry for. You can tell your agent we want to read it. And good
Thank
luck
you.
with your 4-book year. That does sound like absolute madness, but mad respect. So, all right, everyone, I'm going to send you out into the world. Have a wonderful evening. We will be back in April. Good night, everyone.
Everybody, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Good night.